Welcome to Psych Secrets, where we uncover the hidden forces that shape your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. If you've ever found yourself obsessing over someone, whether it's an ex, a friend, or even a stranger, you're not alone. But what if I told you that these persistent thoughts aren't just random? What if your mind is trying to reveal something deeper about your own psyche? Here at Psych Secrets, we don't just skim the surface. We dive deep into psychology, neuroscience, and philosophy to bring you real insights that can help you understand yourself on a whole new level. Today, we're exploring a powerful truth. The people who linger in your mind are not just figures from your past. They are reflections of your unconscious seeking to be understood. By the end of this video, you'll see these thoughts differently, and more importantly, learn how to break free from the patterns that are keeping you stuck. So if you're ready to unlock the secrets of your mind, stay with us until the end, because this might just change the way you see yourself and your thoughts forever. Why can't you stop thinking about them? Have you ever found yourself constantly thinking about someone, even when you don't want to? Maybe it's an ex-partner, a childhood friend, or even a stranger you only met briefly. No matter how much time passes or how busy life gets, they seem to linger in your thoughts like an unfinished sentence. This isn't just nostalgia or a lack of closure. According to Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, these recurring thoughts are signals from the unconscious mind. Your mind doesn't dwell on random people, it fixates on those who represent something deeper within you. In this deep psychological exploration, we will uncover why your brain holds on to certain people, the role of unfinished emotional energy in keeping them in your thoughts, how Jung's psychological projection shapes our perception of others, the shadow self, and why we fixate on people who reflect hidden parts of us, the power of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that tie us to certain people, how to break free from obsessive thoughts and move towards self-integration. By the end of this journey, you'll see that the people who stay on your mind are not just figures from your past. They are reflections of your unconscious seeking to be understood. The brain's emotional attachments, why we can't let go. Your mind doesn't fixate on random things. The human brain is not a passive recorder of events. It actively prioritizes emotionally significant experiences over neutral ones. This means that events tied to strong emotions, love, betrayal, regret, or loss, are encoded much more deeply in our memory than everyday occurrences. This phenomenon is largely explained by the Zeigarnik effect, a psychological principle discovered by Bluma Zeigarnik in the 1920s. She found that the brain has a natural tendency to remember incomplete or interrupted tasks more vividly than completed ones. Scientific example. In her research, Zeigarnik observed that waiters could remember unpaid orders far better than completed ones, but once a bill was settled, the details vanished from memory. The brain fixates on unfinished business because it craves resolution. Real-life example. Have you ever had a song stuck in your head, but it only disappears after you listen to it in full? That's the Zeigarnik effect at work. Your brain seeks closure to move on. The same principle applies to emotional relationships. When a connection ends suddenly or without clear resolution, the unconscious mind keeps revisiting it, replaying memories, and searching for meaning. This is why people who have impacted us emotionally, positively or negatively, seem to linger in our thoughts far longer than those who didn't. Folklore parallel, the unfinished letter. Many folk tales tell of lovers who wrote a final letter but never sent it. Their ghosts linger until the letter is delivered, mirroring how our minds keep unfinished emotional business alive, hoping for an endpoint that never comes. Emotional imprints, how the brain stores relationships. Neuroscience has revealed that emotional experiences don't just exist as memories. They actually reshape the brain structure. When we form deep bonds, our brain creates strong neural pathways associating that person with feelings of love, security, or even pain. Scientific insight. A Harvard study found that when people think about someone they love, their brains release dopamine and oxytocin, the same chemicals that fuel addiction. This explains why emotional bonds can feel impossible to break, especially when the connection was deeply meaningful. Everyday example: a single song, scent, or place can suddenly bring back a rush of emotions tied to a person, even years after they left your life. This is because our brain encodes relationships at a sensory level, making certain triggers bring back powerful emotional memories. Folklore parallel: the ghostly melody. In many cultures, legends tell of a lost lover's favorite song playing mysteriously when their beloved is near. This reflects how deep emotions can be tied to sensory triggers, keeping past relationships alive in our minds. The unfinished emotional loop: why some people haunt our thoughts. When a relationship ends abruptly or is left unresolved, the mind continues to revisit the past, trying to make sense of what happened. This creates an emotional loop, a cycle where the brain keeps searching for missing pieces, unable to fully move forward. Psychological insight: research in attachment theory shows that strong emotional bonds keep certain neural pathways active, especially in cases of abrupt breakups, betrayal, or unresolved conflicts. Real-life example: if someone leaves your life suddenly, whether through ghosting, an unexpected breakup, or even death, your mind keeps replaying memories, conversations, and possibilities in an attempt to process the emotional gap. Folklore parallel: the wandering spirit. Many myths speak of spirits who cannot find peace because they left something unfinished. This reflects how our psychological ghosts, memories of unresolved relationships, keep resurfacing until we confront and integrate them. How to close the loop. Understanding why someone stays in your thoughts is the first step toward reclaiming control. If your mind is holding on to someone, it's because there's something your unconscious still wants to resolve. To break the cycle, acknowledge the unfinished emotion. What is unresolved? Regret, guilt, unspoken words? Identifying the root emotion helps process it consciously. Find your own closure. Don't wait for external resolution. Sometimes closure isn't about an actual conversation, but about internally accepting what happened. Redirect emotional energy. The brain rewires itself through new habits. Investing energy in new experiences helps create fresh neural pathways, making it easier to move on. By understanding why someone lingers in your thoughts, you regain power over your emotions, turning past attachments into lessons rather than burdens. Psychological projection: what they represent in you. Jung's theory of psychological projection, the mind's mirror. Carl Jung's concept of psychological projection suggests that the emotions and traits we recognize in others, whether admiration or resentment, often reveal unconscious aspects of ourselves. Instead of seeing people objectively, our psyche projects inner conflicts, desires, and unresolved emotions onto them. This means that when someone lingers in your thoughts, it's not necessarily about them, it's about what they represent within you. Scientific basis: a study by Emily Pronin and colleagues, 2002, found that people who accused others of being dishonest or selfish were often guilty of minor dishonest behaviors themselves. The unconscious mind protects our ego by externalizing traits we refuse to acknowledge, making them easier to criticize in others rather than facing them within. Everyday example: have you ever met someone who annoyed you without a clear reason? Chances are they display a trait that subconsciously exists in you, but you haven't fully accepted it. Folklore parallel: the shadow in the mirror. Many myths tell of people who see disturbing reflections in mirrors, showing a hidden, darker version of themselves. This represents Jung's concept of the shadow self, the repressed part of our psyche that we deny, yet constantly project onto others. The mirror effect: what you admire or hate in others is a part of you. Projection isn't always negative. Sometimes the people who captivate our thoughts are showing us qualities we secretly aspire to develop. Example: admiration as projection. If you idolize someone for their confidence and charisma, it might be because you long to cultivate those qualities within yourself. If you feel envious of someone's success, it may reveal your own unfulfilled potential rather than true resentment. Scientific insight: A study on self-perception bias, Tesser 1988, found that individuals who feel dissatisfied with their personal growth are more likely to fixate on others who embody their ideal self. Folklore parallel, the hero's reflection. Many ancient myths depict a young warrior admiring a legendary hero, only to later realize they had the same strength within themselves all along. This mirrors the way we project greatness onto others before recognizing our own potential. The dark side of projection, why some people irritate you. Just as we project our aspirations onto others, we also project the traits we suppress. Example, dislike as projection. If someone's arrogance angers you, could it be because you struggle with asserting yourself and feel resentment toward those who do? If you judge someone as lazy, is it because you have an inner fear of not being productive enough? Scientific insight. A study by Freud's student, Wilhelm Steckel, 1911, showed that people often disown traits they feel ashamed of by attributing them to others. This psychological defense mechanism protects the ego from confronting uncomfortable truths. Folklore parallel, the unwanted reflection. Stories often feature characters who see an ugly version of themselves in reflections, but refuse to accept that it's really them. This represents the denial of the shadow self, a direct link to why some people irritate us without explanation. Breaking free from projection, the path to self-awareness. If someone occupies your thoughts, ask yourself, do they embody something I want to become? Do they reflect a trait I avoid confronting in myself? Jung believed that self-awareness dissolves projection. Instead of blaming others for what we feel, recognizing the hidden lessons they reveal allows us to integrate those aspects into ourselves. Steps to stop projecting unconsciously. Identify the emotion. Are you feeling admiration, envy, or irritation? Turn the focus inward. What does this say about you? Is this an aspect you need to develop or accept? Reframe the perspective. Instead of seeing others as better or worse, view them as mirrors reflecting growth opportunities. By mastering this awareness, you reclaim control over your thoughts, no longer obsessing over people, but learning from them. The shadow self, the hidden parts of your mind. Carl Jung's theory of the shadow self suggests that our personality is divided into two parts. The conscious self, the aspects of ourselves that we openly accept and identify with. The shadow self, the hidden, often repressed traits that we deny, reject, or suppress because they conflict with how we want to see ourselves. The shadow isn't inherently negative. It includes both dark and unrealized positive traits, aspects of our personality that remain undeveloped due to societal expectations, upbringing, or personal fear. When someone haunts your thoughts, they may be activating your shadow, bringing forward emotions, desires, or traits that you haven't yet integrated into your conscious self. Why some people haunt your thoughts. 1. They remind you of a past wound. The subconscious fixates on unresolved wounds as a way to seek closure. If someone resembles a person from your past, whether in behavior, personality, or the emotions they evoke, your mind keeps bringing them up as a way to process and heal an old experience. Scientific insight. Studies in trauma psychology, van der Kolk, 1994, show that unresolved emotional wounds remain active in the brain, resurfacing in new situations that mirror past experiences. This explains why we often encounter similar relationship patterns. Our subconscious is trying to work through past pain. Everyday example. Have you ever disliked someone instantly without any logical reason? Sometimes that person reminds you of someone from your past who hurt you, and your subconscious reacts defensively without you even realizing why. Folklore parallel, the ghost of the past. Many ghost stories feature restless spirits unable to move on until their unfinished business is resolved. Our minds function the same way. When a relationship or experience lacks closure, it lingers in our thoughts like a haunting presence. They represent a part of you that you deny. Sometimes people stay in your thoughts because they embody something you refuse to acknowledge within yourself. Jung called this shadow projection. instead of facing a hidden trait within us, we project it onto others. If we don't accept our own anger, ambition, selfishness, or desires, we tend to resent those who openly express these traits. Scientific insight. A study on self-concept defense, Baumeister 1998, found that individuals often reject traits in others that subconsciously exist within themselves but contradict their desired self-image. Example, the judgment reflex. If you can't stop thinking about a bold, outspoken person, it might be because you suppress your own need to speak up. If you resent someone's confidence, it could be because you wish you had more self-assurance. Folklore parallel, the shadow in the mirror. Many legends tell of a person seeing a distorted, darker version of themselves in the mirror, representing the hidden aspects of their nature that they refuse to accept. The mind fixates on what needs integration. Jung believed that the unconscious doesn't forget, it waits. If a certain person keeps appearing in your thoughts, it's because your subconscious is trying to integrate an unresolved part of yourself. The more you resist this integration, the more persistent the thoughts become. Steps to recognizing your shadow triggers. When someone occupies your thoughts, ask, what emotion do they bring up in me? If it's admiration, do they embody something I secretly desire to become? If it's irritation, are they mirroring a suppressed trait that I refuse to acknowledge? If it's regret, do they remind me of an unresolved wound I need to heal? The Tale of the Two Wolves. A Cherokee legend tells of a grandfather teaching his grandson about life. Inside every person, two wolves are fighting, he says. One represents anger, greed, and fear. The other embodies love, kindness, and strength. Which wolf wins? Asks the boy. The one you feed, replies the grandfather. Similarly, the people who stay in your thoughts are feeding a part of your unconscious that seeks recognition. The question isn't just why they haunt you, but what part of yourself are they asking you to acknowledge? Once you integrate your shadow, accepting the lessons it brings instead of resisting them, you break free from obsessive thoughts and regain control over your mind. Synchronicity, meaningful coincidences and emotional bonds. Have you ever found yourself thinking about someone, only for them to suddenly text you or appear in your life? Maybe you dream about an old friend you haven't seen in years, and the next day, you run into them at a cafe. Or perhaps you repeatedly encounter the same name, symbol, or event at seemingly random times. Carl Jung called this phenomenon synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence that defies logic but feels deeply significant. Unlike mere chance, synchronicities appear to be aligned with our inner thoughts, emotions, or personal journeys, hinting at an underlying psychological or even spiritual connection. How synchronicity works. The hidden order behind coincidences. Jung suggested that synchronicity isn't just about random coincidences. It's the unconscious mind making connections between the inner world and external reality. This idea is linked to his theory of the collective unconscious, which states that humans share a deep inherited layer of the psyche, filled with universal symbols, emotions, and archetypes. In other words, your mind may recognize a meaningful connection before your conscious self can rationalize it. Scientific insight. While mainstream psychology doesn't fully embrace Jung's concept of synchronicity, there are scientific parallels in quantum physics. Studies on quantum entanglement suggest that two particles can remain connected and react simultaneously, even when separated by vast distances. Some researchers speculate that human consciousness may operate similarly, explaining why some emotional bonds feel like they transcend time and space. Why some people keep reappearing in your life. Synchronicities often occur when there is unfinished emotional energy between two people. If someone frequently appears in your mind and then in real life, it may signal an unresolved emotional connection. There may be an aspect of the relationship that needs closure or deeper understanding. A symbolic message from your subconscious. They might represent a part of yourself that requires healing or development. A call to personal growth. Your mind is drawing attention to this person as a reflection of where you are in life. Real life example. Have you ever met someone new and felt an instant familiarity, as if you had known them in another life? Jung would argue that this isn't necessarily reincarnation, but rather an unconscious recognition of a pattern, archetype, or unresolved emotion within yourself. Folklore parallel, the red thread of fate. In East Asian mythology, it is said that people destined to meet are connected by an invisible red thread. No matter how much time passes or how far apart they are, this thread will always pull them back together at the right moment. This ancient belief mirrors Jung's idea that certain connections are preordained by the deeper forces of the psyche. How to interpret synchronicities in your life. If you keep encountering the same person, symbol, or situation, consider, what was I thinking or feeling before this happened? Often, synchronicities align with your inner emotions. If you were reflecting on a past love, unresolved pain, or a future decision, synchronicity may confirm or challenge your thoughts. What does this person or event symbolize for me? Instead of focusing on the external event, ask what it represents in your inner world. What is my subconscious trying to reveal? Sometimes synchronicities highlight hidden desires, fears, or life transitions. Final thought, are these coincidences or something deeper? Jung believed that synchronicity isn't about predicting the future, but about understanding the deeper patterns of our psyche. Whether you see these events as spiritual signs, unconscious reflections, or mere chance, one thing is clear: your mind is constantly weaving meaning into the fabric of your reality. When someone or something keeps appearing in your life, don't ignore it. Instead, reflect on what it means for you and how it can guide your personal growth. How to break free from unwanted thoughts. Obsessive thoughts about someone can feel like a prison, one where you are both the captive and the warden. When someone lingers in your mind long after they've left your life, it's not just about them, it's about you, your emotions, and what they symbolize within your unconscious mind. The good news? You can break free. By understanding the psychological mechanisms behind these thoughts, you can regain control and redirect your mental energy toward personal growth. Step 1. Self-awareness, recognizing the emotional root. Before you can release someone from your thoughts, you need to understand why they're there in the first place. Ask yourself, what does this person represent in my life? Do they trigger an unresolved wound, an unmet need, or an aspect of myself that I haven't fully accepted? Am I fixating on them because of what they mean to me, or because of what they make me feel about myself? Example: a person who constantly thinks about an emotionally unavailable partner might not just miss them, they may be confronting deep-seated fears of abandonment that stem from childhood experiences. Scientific insight. Psychologist John Bowlby, the founder of attachment theory, found that unresolved childhood attachment wounds often manifest in adult relationships. If a person from your past mirrors these early emotional patterns, your mind fixates on them in an attempt to resolve the original wound. What to do? Instead of asking, why can't I stop thinking about them? Ask, what unresolved part of me are they triggering? This shift in perspective can be the first step toward emotional freedom. Step 2. Emotional release. Stop suppressing your feelings. The more you try to push emotions away, the stronger they return. Your brain doesn't simply forget unfinished emotions, it buries them until they resurface in obsessive thoughts, dreams, or unexpected emotional reactions. Example: have you ever tried to forget a song only to have it play on a loop in your head? That's the Zeigarnik effect, your brain's tendency to fixate on unfinished experiences. The same thing happens with unresolved emotional attachments. Scientific insight. A UCLA study on emotional suppression found that trying to ignore emotions activates the amygdala, the brain's fear and stress center. In contrast, acknowledging and expressing emotions lowers stress responses and allows the brain to process them more effectively. What to do? Journaling. Write freely about your emotions without judgment. therapy, or talking to a trusted person, expressing your thoughts out loud can help you process them. Meditation and mindfulness. Observe your emotions without resisting them. When you stop fighting emotions, they lose their grip on you. Key insight. The goal isn't to erase emotions, it's to process them fully so they no longer dominate your mind. Step 3. Mental detachment. Separate the person from the lesson. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing their thoughts about someone are about that person. In reality, they are about you. You're not fixated on the person. You're fixated on the emotional meaning they hold in your life. You don't miss them. You miss the feeling they gave you. You're not seeking closure from them. You're seeking closure from yourself. Example, think of an old teacher who had a profound impact on your life. Over time, you may stop thinking about them, but the lesson they taught you remains forever. In the same way, when you detach from a person, but hold on to the lesson, you free yourself from emotional dependency. Scientific insight. Studies on neuroplasticity show that the brain rewires itself based on mental focus. The more you dwell on a person, the stronger the neural pathways associated with them become. However, if you shift focus to personal growth, the old neural pathways weaken and new ones form. What to do? Identify the lesson. What did this person teach you about love, boundaries, or yourself? Reframe the attachment. Instead of seeing them as a loss, view them as a teacher whose role in your life was to help you grow. Practice mental redirection. When thoughts of them arise, shift focus to something that actively improves your life, whether it's a skill, a passion, or a meaningful goal. Key insight. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means integrating the lesson while releasing the attachment. Step 4. Rewiring your brain, building new neural pathways. Your thoughts create mental habits. The more you dwell on someone, the more your brain reinforces their presence. But just like any habit, obsessive thoughts can be broken by rewiring your focus. Example, imagine your thoughts are like a hiking trail. The more you walk the same path, thinking about someone, the deeper the trail becomes. But if you start walking a new path, focusing on yourself, the old trail eventually disappears from lack of use. Scientific insight. A UCLA study on neuroplasticity discovered that the brain has the ability to rewire itself by forming new neural connections. When people actively replace obsessive thoughts with healthier ones, the brain physically reshapes itself, weakening old emotional loops. What to do? Engage in new activities. Learning something new stimulates dopamine production, creating a natural reward system. Change your environment. New surroundings trigger fresh neural associations. Surround yourself with different people. Positive social interactions reinforce new mental patterns. Use affirmations. Repeating empowering statements helps recondition thought patterns. Key insight. Your brain is not fixed. It adapts based on what you choose to focus on. Final takeaway. You are in control. Unwanted thoughts don't control you. You control them. When you shift from passively experiencing emotions to actively processing and redirecting them, you break free from obsessive thinking. By developing self-awareness, releasing emotions, detaching mentally, and rewiring your brain, you move from a state of fixation to one of transformation. Because in the end, letting go isn't about forgetting, it's about making space for something better. Who really owns your mind? Your mind is not a chaotic stream of random thoughts. It is an intricate system that prioritizes unresolved emotions, subconscious patterns, and hidden desires. But here's the real question. Are you in control of these thoughts, or are they controlling you? Your thoughts are messages, not chains. Most people treat obsessive thoughts as a problem to be solved or a burden to escape. But in reality, they are messages from your subconscious. Example, imagine a persistent knock on a locked door inside your mind. Ignoring it won't make it go away. The knocking will only grow louder until you finally open the door and face what's inside. Psychological insight. Carl Jung believed that obsessive thoughts are often the psyche's way of seeking integration. When a thought repeats itself, it's because your unconscious is asking you to pay attention to something you haven't fully processed yet. Instead of resisting these thoughts, ask yourself, what emotions are attached to this person? Do they represent a quality, fear, or desire within me? What unfinished story am I trying to complete through them? The moment you shift from fighting the thoughts to learning from them, you move from being a victim of your own mind to its master. Your unconscious holds the key to your freedom. Many people think they need to forget someone in order to move on, but forgetting is not the solution. Integration is. Example, in many folk tales, the hero does not defeat the monster by running away. They defeat it by facing it head-on and understanding its nature. The same applies to your thoughts. You don't need to erase them. You need to learn from them. Neuroscience insight. A study on neuroplasticity from UCLA found that when people consciously engage with their thoughts, rather than suppressing them, they activate higher cognitive functions that allow for emotional resolution. This means that by examining why someone lingers in your mind, you actually rewire your brain to let go naturally. Key realization: you don't need to force yourself to stop thinking about someone. You need to understand why they are there and what they are trying to reveal to you. Reclaim your mind. Reclaim your power. Who really owns your mind? Is it you, or is it the ghosts of your past, the unresolved emotions, and the stories you haven't yet completed? The power to reclaim your mind lies not in forgetting, but in understanding. Final thought: if someone lingers in your mind, they are a lesson, not a prison. Once you integrate the lesson, the thought no longer has power over you. Because in the end, true freedom is not about escaping your thoughts, it's about mastering them.